The world is saved. The living room's dark, save for light being cast from the big TV screen and the imminent sunrise that's teasing the one starry sky with whispers of morning.
Hey, George.
Hey, Lions, I'm in your house.
This is like the fifth episode that
Something
started
like
with that.
Yeah, well, because I figured that that's how we let people know, and because there may be some type of a gag at some point in the episode where it doesn't make any sense. It's like, don't they normally do this remotely? And then all of a sudden you hear like, and then like.
I believe that I'm definitely going to have to edit that out, by the way, because it was so loud.
Yeah.
So I believe the two white guys podcasting.
Yeah.
The idea is that we and the third member, the audience, right, plus Mike, who's quiet, we're all just hanging out talking, right? So placing either zero emphasis on our location or all the emphasis on our location like shatters the illusion, right? So it's got to be at any moment, anyone listening to this has to believe they could just turn their head and see us because they're at the table having the conversation with. That's the whole conceit.
Okay. So then in that case, then the reason why I say it is because normally we do it in my house, but this time I'm in your house.
Yes.
But I think that outside of being in your home, we played a video.
No. Oh, wait, yes. Oh. Do you remember the name of that video game? Because you've now asked me. No, don't look it up. You've now asked me 3 times what the name was.
Attack on Titan.
And you have literally already forgotten, haven't you?
Yep. It's Attack something.
No, it's not.
Freedom Planet.
I
don't know why I can't keep the name in my head on this.
Dude, 15 minutes ago, when you were like, what was it? What was the name again? Well, I keep it straight. And as soon as I said it's Freedom Planet, in the back of my mind, it was, and then he forgot.
Yeah, because I wrote it down. I don't keep things in my head that I write down. No, because Teddy played this with me, and he said, oh, Dad, we should play that game. What is it? And I just said Attack on Titan. Because this is the first thing that just popped into my head. It's like, cool, I want to play Attack on Titan. Okay, buddy. So, yeah, we played Freedom Planet. So this game came out last year, 2021, assuming I wrote this date down correctly, which I'm actually not positive that I did because the formatting is weird. It's on all modern platforms because it's a NEWstalgia game. And I do want to give a quick shout. This game was actually brought to my attention from one of our co-podcasts, another podcast in our genre, called Pursuing Pixels. So there'll be a link in the show notes to them. They're good dudes. They make a good podcast. They're also like hyper active on Twitter. Like they really like think out loud on Twitter about the games they're deconstructing. So it's like they're fun to follow. Yep.
Seem like nice people. So there'll be a link to their stuff in the show notes. Here's my summary for the game, Attack on Titan. Some people were sitting around a table, maybe at a coffee shop or something, and someone said, "What if Sonic and Knuckles could be locked on to Mega Man X?" And then they just got up and went to an office somewhere and made that game.
Yep.
And that's this game.
Yeah.
It
literally feels like you had Mega Man X and Sonic go fusion, ha, and then Attack on Titan.
Yeah. Which, I mean, to be fair, Sonic and Knuckles maybe, other than the Game Genie, were there any other games that you could connect to other games besides the Game Genie? To me, that is the unique Sonic and Knuckles thing, right? Is that you could like lock on Sonic 3.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And that's what somebody was like, no, what if you shoved a Super Nintendo cartridge in there?
Absolutely. But no, it was very interesting. And so, and you kind of mentioned how it came to both of our, into our spheres, which was, I think on Twitter, Pursuing Pixels said, oh, hey, this game is just like Sonic, but with a melee attack. That changes everything. And like, I looked at it, you looked at it and said, yeah, it's done.
Yeah. No,
we're in.
And one thing I do like about their show is they're not pure critics. Like they like to promote. So when they share something, it's because they're enjoying it. And guy was like, oh yeah, I don't really like Sonic, but having a melee attack changes everything. And I was like, I do like Sonic. So will this be a like continuation? Like, will having a melee attack make it even better, or will that ruin my experience? And I was like, I need to know. And you, to your credit, a couple times I've just been like, hey, and you go, all right, like with no follow up, no explanation, no like, I don't have to go to bat for why I want to play this weird game you've never heard of. You're just like, okay,
yeah, I'm in. You know, I'm open to new experiences.
Oh,
so do we shill?
We do, because I would say that was our NEWstalgia experience, right? So if you like what we're doing, you can make sure you subscribe to the show. You can go to our websites, follow us on the Twitters. We're both there. I also stream most of the games we play on Twitch. I think I streamed about like 70% of this game. I think I finished it off stream, but I played the vast majority of it where people could see, which is always fun because a lot of like these indie games bring in like the indie fans. And so it's like cool to talk to those people. If you want to go a little bit above and beyond just being a listener, you can leave a rating and review, or you can just refer us directly to somebody. Telling people word of mouth reviews, I think, is always the best. And if you want to help support what we're doing with money, then you can become one of our patrons on the Patreon. Links in the show notes. And everybody who supports us on Patreon gets the after show, which is just more show, but only for people with money. And then
people.
Yeah. I mean, if you're listening to this on a smartphone, like you got $1, right? You got $1. Like the lowest tier is $1. All of that extra content for $1.
$1 US.
Yeah. I think right now we're up to 3 currencies. I think some of our patrons are in Canadian dollars. And I think we have 1 or 2 in euros.
Excellent.
It's kind of cool.
Yep. And if it's $1,000, we'll take a video of lions slapping me into a pool.
Yes, that one. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Is this also going to become a bit? You're just going to keep throwing out $1,000 rewards.
$1,000 tier. I don't know. Maybe if I can remember.
Need to add on Patreon the $1,000 tier with just question marks.
Yeah. I mean,
dealer's choice.
Yeah. There's a lot of things I would do for a cool G.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean,
there's a lot of things I wouldn't do.
Totally. Yes. Yeah. That list is hopefully longer.
Yeah. Substantially, but not as long as you'd think.
So if you want, I get to hit you in this.
Yeah.
Okay. So at any of the tiers, some of the upper level tiers, including this new $1,000 tier, you get your name shouted out on the show. So first we need to thank our 8-bit classics, Jacob,
a dragon named Lilac,
Yarno, a
biker named Carol,
Jason,
a dogged ear Mila,
John,
a duck-billed Torque,
and Kevin.
Prince Dial?
I'll say Doll.
Yeah, because most of the time I was hard thumbing through some of those, so
no,
I would see it, but they didn't get a chance to say it.
And our 16-bit hero Michael,
a servitile Serpentine,
and our full 3D supporter David,
Star-Lord, galaxy-wide dictator, and first citizen Arctivius Brevin.
There's a lot of characters in this game. Sonic games do not have as many characters.
No, or
well, they did, and it was bad.
Yeah. Well, and not only the number of characters, this actually leads us not into audiovisual, but into its own little subcategory called notes on story. I have notes. It's just the sheer volume of characters, the rate at which they're introduced, and their relationships to each other are a Kafka-esque nightmare. It's all over the place, man. I mean, like, because, one of the, again, in my own personal experience, one of the things that you should typically try to do is introduce the protagonist within the first, like 10 minutes of your movie, right? And in a video game, I'd say you should probably do it sooner than that.
Probably, yeah.
But like at first, they when the game first opens, they show, the prince and the king, and then the king dies.
Yeah,
and
the aliens.
And the aliens.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, this is going to be some like weird alien thing. And it kind of is, but not till like way later, So then I'm like, okay, cool. And then it's like, okay, so all of that happened. Now let's talk about the protagonist. It's like, well, then what was all of that about?
Could I have not gotten that like when it happened?
Yeah.
Maybe the character it happened to, give me a flag. And okay, wait, we're way off. We will come back to story because there is so much to say about the story. But if we're just talking about the appearance and the sounds,
it appears like the story is a mess. And here's why.
Well done. I thought the pixel art in this was phenomenal. Like, not just good because it's aping an older style. They leaned pretty hard into things that wouldn't really have been possible on the Super Nintendo or on the Genesis. And I have the utmost respect for the Shovel Knights of the world, where they're like, nah, dude, NES restrictions. And they cheat a couple times, but generally, like, that game sort of could have been on the Nintendo, right? But I also just love beautiful pixel art and great chiptunes, and this game has both of those. Like, the pixel art is super fantastic, and the music is just bops. So, like, yeah, fine. Take advantage of that widescreen, get those extra frames in there, have more, background variety, because you have the storage space. Like, go nuts.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that the Shovel Knights, where they say, hey, NES era restrictions keeps you from drifting too far from, like a nostalgic pixel art game into, Sonic 3D Blast or whatever, right? But this game, to say that this game is Sonic with melee attack, from a visual standpoint, is 100% on the money, because it looks and sounds just like a Sonic game, to the point where my actual note is how they're not getting sued by Sonic Team is a miracle. And
well, thank God they are like cool with fan works, because if you made a game that looked this much like Super Mario World, you would get sued into oblivion.
Well, that's the thing, is that Megan, when I first booted up and started playing it, Megan said, "You guys playing a Sonic game?" And I said, "No, it's actually this game, Attack on Titan." And Freedom Planet.
Yeah.
So it's this other game, Freedom Planet, and she was like, "Oh, man, I don't know. That looks like a Sonic game to me." And I said, "Well, fortunately, as a general rule, it's kind of difficult to sue over overarching aesthetics, And the game does ostensibly play differently enough that you could make an argument for it. But yeah, man, I mean, like, it goes to show you that you can make a good Sonic game in the modern era,
right? Well, and there's little things that are you probably wouldn't necessarily pick up on if you were just playing a Sonic game. But then when you see this and you're told it's not a Sonic game, your brain starts now dissecting little details, right? So the main character, Lilac, is a dragon, Millie is a dog person, and Carol is a cat person. Cat thing.
Yeah. Judging by the way that she like jumps.
Yeah. And they're all super anthropomorphic, but they're done in the style of Sonic the Hedgehog, right? The big hands and feet,
big
eyes, right? Like kind of like rude dude attitude, right? Which is not like a bad thing, but it's like you can't even just look at the main character and not be like, oh, this is like someone's DeviantArt, like fan art from when they were a teenager that they now have the skills to turn into a professional video game. And it's the slopes, like the way the platforms are, right? Yeah, there's the loops, there's just all these little things that are like, oh, this is, surely they know. And I mean, they do, right? This is obviously like, we wanted to make a game that is in the spirit of Sonic the Hedgehog. But could you imagine doing this by accident and thinking like, I made my own thing, and then you show it to someone and they're like, cool Sonic fan art.
Yeah, you're like, Convergent Evolution. Yeah, no, very much so. Has all of that look and very and feel. Honestly, if you had shown me the character art for this game, I would have probably said like, oh, is this from one of those new Sonic games where they have all those weird side characters and stuff?
Was this one of the portable Sonics I never played?
Yeah, absolutely. I will say though that I did appreciate because so it would have been very easy for them to have gotten somewhat lazy with this, being like, look, man, we're gonna make Sonic but with a melee attack, but they didn't. They not only did they create their own characters, they created so many characters, so many characters, as we kind of mentioned in the story portion of it. But not only that, the thing that I appreciated was that I feel that all of the different characters, especially the playable ones, very much so passed the silhouette test,
Yes.
Which is nice, because then, their design is different enough that even when you're playing some of the same levels, you never are like, oh, am I, like things are going so fast, and then you accidentally try to do a Lilac thing because you're clearly not playing as Lilac, you're playing as Carol, So the fact that they did put enough energy and effort into the character design to make it varied enough to pass the silhouette test, I appreciated.
I agree with that, and I don't know if the silhouette test normally includes this or if I'm just needlessly extrapolating, but I think that extends to the way they move generally, like in cutscenes when they're just moving like characters, and the way they move when you're controlling them like through the world, right? So Lilac runs like Sonic, basically, right? So when she's at like full speed, she's kind of like leans down and like her little hair scales thing is like whipping around in front. I guess it's hair. Yeah. Anyway, but her body language is very, like rude dude with a dude. Like, so she's the Sonic stand-in. And then Millie is kind of like the Tails, like super innocent, right? But she has, not only is her silhouette different, but she lowers herself to the ground like a dog, like on all fours a lot. She kind of is like bubbly, like arms out to the side, like Japanese anime girl kind of thing. Carol is like really arrogant, and so she's
Knuckles.
Yes, but she does like a lot of defiant, like, turning away, or like she'll like lean over and say something like, smart aleck, and it's just, even if the whole thing was blacked out the whole time, you would still say like, oh, this is Lilac, that's Carol, and that's Millie, because everything they do, all of their like characterizations are super unique, and there's a billion little facial animations. Like it looks like they animated like the eyes independently. They have like a lot of mouth flaps because there's a lot of talking. So like a lot of body language. Sometimes they interact with objects in the environment. So like they didn't just say like, oh, these are cardboard cutouts that look very different and have a unique silhouette, but they spent like a lot of time on little subtle, and I can't say this with 100% confidence, but I don't think they did like pixel warping where it's like they took a picture of the hand and then just warped it up and down. Like, I think they actually redrew all all of these animations. So it was just like a million frames of animation.
Yeah, no. And again, this game is very, very lovingly crafted. And to your point, right, is that I do feel that, the movement is very, very seamless and fluid for all of the characters, So, and that's really, really important in a game about momentum control, which Sonic games and by extension Freedom Planet are, So you can't have, really choppy animation, because then that's going to, if it then has to animate all of that stuff, when you say, oh, I want to now, jump, and then all of a sudden you don't nicely curl into a ball, you like suddenly like hit a ball, it wouldn't quite feel right, and it wouldn't quite play right. I do think that the degree of fluidity in this game does far outstrip anything that could have been done on the SNES or the Genesis. But again, it passes like the nostalgia test of, it doesn't look like, The Witcher 3 or something like that. It doesn't look like The Last of Us. It looks like a pixel art game.
Yeah. And it feels right.
Yes.
Right. Like when you say like, oh wow, that was so fast and so fluid, and it's like, oh yeah, Sonic games were like that. And it's like sometimes, yes, sometimes, but like, the reason Sonic Mania was good is because Sonic Mania is how you remember Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Right. The reason this game is good is because that's how you remember Sonic 3 and Knuckles.
And again, just a final note on what you kind of said before. It just the music is just banging,
Really good.
Yeah, the music's really great. It's got a bunch of like kind of, it does sound like a Sonic game in the sense it's got a lot of like, light guitar in it, and it just feels like just pulled straight out of the 90s. Feels right.
I do want to call out two things just so I don't forget. The environments are as lovingly crafted as the characters. There's 6 stages, I think, each with 2 acts. I mean, it's structured exactly like a Sonic game.
Yep.
Right. But then you also see a whole bunch of other environments that you never play in because there's so many cutscenes. So like, you see not just the levels where you are doing stuff, but there's a bunch of additional artwork done literally just for the purposes of delivering the story. Right. And so a lot of variety and a lot of detail. They do the foreground, midground, background, so they can do the parallax thing when you're moving at high speeds and stuff. And it all looks great. And this is just something I have to say so that I know I'm not insane. The font they use in this is the Quintet font. It is the font from certain parts of ActRaiser. It is the font from all of Soul Blazer. Like, it just is. Like, I would confidently slap that over. And do you wanna?
No.
You shouldn't. Because I've played ActRaiser and Soul Blazer so many times. But it did create like a tiny bit of cognitive dissonance, because this is a game that I played this on PC. You played this on your PS5 probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, we're playing it on modern hardware, but it is obviously aping the Sega Genesis specifically, or the, I guess, Master System if you're weird. And then to see a font that I 100% associate with the Super Nintendo, because it was from, as far as I know, Quintet only ever made Super Nintendo games. Like, that's just, I got over it. But every time there was text on screen, a little part of my brain just went like, huh.
Are we playing ActRaiser?
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's not just the shape of the letters, but it's like the two-tone thing where like the top of the letter is one color and the bottom of the letter is a slightly different color. It's usually like a light blue or something. Yeah, dude, I don't know. I mean, it's great font, but it's just like if you were trying to ape the vibe of the Sega Genesis, this is not the font I would have chosen. Like, it's just I don't know, maybe like one of the fonts from Phantasy Star or from Sonic, right? Even though there's a ton of text in that game, like there was some right in the menus and stuff. Like it's weird.
Well, maybe this was kind of like an Easter egg, where it's just kind of, oh no, we're gonna emulate this Genesis game. The text that's gonna be from Super Nintendo.
That's gonna screw it, everyone.
Yeah. There's like one person who was ready to burn the world down, and everybody's like, nobody cares, Jeff. No one's gonna notice. And then you noticed.
And then I cared.
Yeah.
And then I burned the world down. Gameplay.
So one of the things, this is just kind of this will just ease us. I really kind of liked that duels counted down to a 1-up instead of counting up to a 1-up.
They did?
Yeah.
I didn't notice that.
Yep.
Neat.
Yeah. Because like I noticed that, I was like, man, I'm collecting a lot of jewels. And then I was like, 26. That doesn't sound right. And then as I was collecting them, I was like, oh, it's counting down. And then when you hit 0, that's when you get the extra life, Because
I kind of like that.
Yeah, because it's just kind of it kind of takes the guesswork out, because it's like, oh, do I get a 1-up at like 100 rings or 200 rings or whatever? It's like, no, man, whatever they set it at, you just drill down to 0. I will say though that, and you may have gotten a little bit more experience with the lives and continue system, because you suck more than me.
It's true.
So when you die, right, you lose a life, and then you kind of just go back into it, right?
Yeah, there are scattered throughout the world. There are checkpoints. Some of them are obvious, like at a screen transition.
Right.
Some of them are less so, but they're not like the big spinning lamppost from Sonic. Like you may have passed a checkpoint and have no idea.
Right. Now, when you actually die, though, when you lose all of your lives, you can continue.
Right.
And you get 5 lives back. Right.
Yes.
I did not see what would seem to be a limiter on continue.
So I agree. I also did not notice a limiter on continues. I think I had to continue twice, because in the back half of the game, some of the bosses get like pretty hard. But as far as I can tell, not only are there seemingly unlimited continues, because this game also has a save system, but when you continue, I'm pretty sure you even still pick up at the checkpoint.
Right. So that was my experience as well. So I was, but again, I think I continued once, And so when I did that, I took note. I'm like, I think that there's a limit on this, but I did not stress test it.
Yeah.
I say all of that to say that, I mean, you know me, I love short cycle time. So great, but there's one currency in this game, and it's lives.
Okay. So I think what they probably did, with how thoughtful most of the other stuff we're going to talk about in the gameplay section is, what this seems like to me is it's just fun to collect crystals. It's just fun to collect coins and rings, right? It's just fun. But most people don't love getting kicked back to the title screen and having to start the game over from scratch. So they kept the currency, and they even kept the thing the currency buys, and they just made that thing intrinsic only. I want to say I didn't have to continue.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say I, had 99 lives, when I finished the game or whatever. But like the game doesn't care. I have to care.
Right.
And for a game that is specific, like that would be weird in a modern game, like that was trying to be cool and modern to still include that. But for a game that's specifically going for that sweet, sweet nostalgia drip, I'm like, yeah, that trade-off kind of makes sense. Like, keep the fun collecting crystals part, because every once in a while there's something that you collect crystals and it's kind of risky, right? So it's like keep the fun, will I risk falling to my death to get these like 5 extra crystals, but then, just let me play the goddamn game if I make a mistake. It's like, it's not bad.
No, it's not bad, but I think that for a relatively minimal cost. So again, so basically what that means is that ultimately, to your point, right? Crystals have no real value, because you're collecting them because we're human beings and we like to collect things, they just literally just open up our brains and like direct line into the ape skull of, collect things, monkey. So I say that to say that there could have been a number of different things that they could have done to, in my opinion, get around this. One, and this would have just been fun for me, which would have been like, whenever you get it counted all the way down, maybe for the rest of that level or something, double your stamina bar, just something fun, just a little thing that would be like, not game breaking, because that means you could now do 2 dragon dashes instead of 1 for, by the time you collect the 100, the last quarter of the level, automatically give me a shield, any of them,
Ooh, okay.
just something that, would have been kind of like I collected them all, and now I got a very minor thing, that is actually a currency that improves gameplay,
right. So keeping the collecting things as fun, that mechanic stays unchanged.
Right.
But please do the modern thing with the live system.
Yeah.
And so pivot the collecting things as fun to now has this other small mechanical.
Yeah, just small mechanical benefit. It doesn't have to stack, it doesn't have to carry, it doesn't have to do anything like that. Because ultimately, even in Sonic, right, when they kind of, in the later ones, when they said like, okay, rings, like lives, like even when you lose all of your lives, it just kicks you back to like the beginning of Act 2 or something like that, right? But what rings then did was they activated the portals for you to get Chaos Emeralds, which you could use to turn into Supersonic, which gave them meaning again outside of just gaining lives.
Well, and I was about to say this, and then I just realized, that's exactly what Supersonic did, which is when you turn into Supersonic, not only do you have to pass a certain threshold, but then they count down.
Right.
And when you run out of rings, not only do you revert out of being Supersonic, but you now have no rings. Right. And there's no way to turn Supersonic off. You have to, you run the car until the gas tank is empty.
Yeah.
So I think that would actually be, that probably would be the way to do it, is like, while you have, count up to 100, maybe, whatever. Like, instead of doing lives, like, just remove lives and continues entirely, right?
Yeah.
I can just continue endlessly, or I can continue to play endlessly. And then I have a shield that, like, the shield now can't be taken off of me, but now my crystals are counting down, right? And then that creates an interesting relationship with like, do I want 100? Because then they will start counting down, right? Do I want to wait and get 100 when I'm like closer to the boss or whatever? Or the double dash, something, right?
Yeah.
I think the decision they made was
in the correct direction.
It's in the correct direction, and it's the simplest modification, right? So it's like, we're going to change this one variable. This collecting things is now just fun, as opposed to allows you to continue playing the game.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't then, and I mean, the sequel to this, I think, actually comes out this year, or maybe early next year. But they didn't then take the next step, and that may have been intentional. They may have been like, no, let's just make a tiny tweak, and then if that tiny tweak goes over okay, then we can make another tiny tweak and kind of iterate.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that, definitely I would rather them do what they did than make lives mean something and kick me back to the beginning of the game. Because I can tell you what, man, if I had hit that continue screen, instead of that, it just popped up the title screen, I would have put the controller down and not picked it back up.
Well, and it does Sonic 3 style. You have the little yellow box, so you can save. You can have multiple save files, but still, there is something just a tiny bit soul crushing about, you die and then you Sega, and it's like.
So I definitely like that. But yeah, I mean, just some little thing that improves gameplay to be like, hey, something extrinsic to collecting the gems, right? Just some type of like external reward. Because, and again, this I think is one of the key differences between us as players, is that I think that you find CollectAthon, the act of collecting things, slightly more joyful than I do.
No, a lot more.
Okay.
I love it. Love it.
Okay, yeah. So to me, like, I enjoy collecting stuff, but that peters out real fast. And then I've got to have like a reason that I'm collecting things. Not because I don't enjoy collecting things, but because there are other things I enjoy doing more.
Yeah. No, and not every game I've played that has that mechanic is equally fun. Mm-hmm. But when, Donkey Kong Country, Super Mario, and any of its like iterations, just love picking stuff up. And I think part of the reason I like it, honestly, is because I hate actual physical clutter. So this allows me to scratch that itch with no consequences, right? No matter how many rings I make Sonic pick up, no matter how many gems I make Lilac crash into at 1,000 miles an hour, like, I never actually have more physical crap in my home.
Yeah, I will tell you, I actually I said this to my parents at one point, several times actually, which was they were talking about getting a gift for the kids, and I was like, remember, when you buy a gift for my children, don't think about it in terms of money, because it's your money. I don't care. Right. Don't think about it in terms of like sound, because I can tune that stuff out or just negate the sound quality to it. I want you to think of it in units of how many times I have to bend at the waist to pick up that toy. Because that's what matters to me. So if you get them a toy that when they dump it out, 1,000 tiny things roll all over my house, I'll kill you.
No, yeah, okay.
Yeah. So yeah. So Legos, it's like that's fine, but because Legos, when you dump them all out, they kind of all stay in like a pile. So I can sit there and
they're not round,
right? But like a lot of like the like those like round like bouncy ball toys and stuff. If they dump them out and it rolls all over the place, I'm like, oh man, that gave you 0.2 seconds of joy and just caused me a half an hour of crawling all over this house on my hands and knees to pick it up.
Yeah,
I don't like that CollectAthon.
No, yes, and I'm 100% with you on this. So since we talked about the crystals, this seems like a good time to talk about the combat because you specifically mentioned Supersonic,
yep.
Right? So Sonic's crystals or Sonic's rings are to Lilac's crystals only in the
collectability.
Get a 1-up,
yep.
Right? Yeah, the collectability, the get a 1-up from this.
They are not tied to life.
Right. She has an honest to God health. They're pips.
System.
They're
yeah,
pips.
They're pips, yeah.
They're I think they're red leaves with like a gold outline.
Mm-hmm.
So they've been dipped in gold. Which I don't. Was there an explanation for that? Why they're red? Okay. Quick side note: we will get into this more when we talk about the story. There's a lot of American teenagers think Asian stuff is cool in this game, and those leaves look very thing you would buy at a tacky gift shop, right? Like, and I don't mean that they look bad in the game. It's just like I have seen things like that in a tacky gift shop, and there's a lot of that throughout. Anyway, because this game has an emphasis on combat, right? In Sonic, Eggman could be the only person you ever interacted with, right? You could leave every single robot filled with rabbits and squirrels and chipmunks and stuff. But in this game, because combat is a thing they specifically gave you mechanics for, they've kind of incentivized it, but again, sort of intrinsically. You don't have to deal with enemies. Well, every once in a while you have to, but generally you don't have to deal with
outside
enemies.
of like mini bosses and bosses. Yeah, I mean, like I'm trying to think.
When you get into the spaceship, which is like stage 6, I think, there are doors that you have to open with keys, and every once in a while, instead of the key being in a box, it's in an enemy, right? But it's like that enemy is obviously between you and the door. Like you don't have to go hunting for it. You don't have to go murder every enemy. Like it's obvious. Like in a Zelda, all the doors shut, and it's like, oh, I have to kill these enemies to make doors open. It's basically that. But I love the fact that they said, we're not going to make the thing you collect for fun also the thing that keeps you from dying. You're going to just straight up have a health bar.
Yep.
And maybe you can. I can't pinpoint exactly why I'm glad those things are separated, but I'm super glad they're separated.
Well, because I think that especially if you enjoy the CollectAthon, the stress of having all of your quote hard work lost in an instant, and literally like when when you've got like 80 rings and Sonic gets hit and you just see the spewing of rings and you're like, oh
no,
because I mean,
my life savings.
Are you gonna die? No, because there's a million rings. You're gonna grab at least 1 or 2, maybe even 10, but that's not 89 rings. That's not gonna get you to Supersonic.
No, that you just explained it. Sonic has a health bar that you constantly have to struggle for because you're always 1 hit from 0.
Right.
Sonic always drops all of his rings. So if you have 500 rings or 1 ring, you can take the same amount of damage, right? So in a Sonic game, if you get hit, you lose all your rings and you want a lot of rings so that it's easier to recover at least 1. And then if you get hit again and you've dropped a subset of a subset of a subset, right? And you loop until you eventually screw up and die. In this, because you just straight up have a health bar, not only does that mean you can make a bunch of mistakes, right? Because your health bar is actually pretty large.
Yeah, it's pretty generous.
And I think each pip is, 2 hits.
It is.
So you have like 8 pips, which is really like 16 hits. And some things do more or less damage, whatever. But they've also, because now the thing you do for health is not the thing you collect, there are things that generate health that are, because you can't do that with weird CollectAthon items like the crystals, right? So sometimes you kill like several enemies in like quick succession and life just comes out of them because you like did a cool thing, or you like knock over like a destructible piece of the environment. It just has health in it. And I didn't stress test this, but I guarantee you some of that is like programmatic. Like this had health in it because you needed health.
Right.
Not if you had come through here with full health, this would not have dropped health.
Or more than half health.
Right.
know?
Yeah. Wherever the line is.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. And to me, to your point, right, is that, Sonic always has 1 hit point, right? 1 or 0 hit points, right? And so that's the thing is that, the thing I like about a health bar is that when I make a mistake, I can immediately hone back in on my true objective. Not suddenly I have a sub-objective of collecting rings, which sometimes is the thing that gets you hit again, you know, which can get frustrating because then like you'll spend 30 seconds where you're like, I haven't even tried to hit the bad guy because all I've been doing is running around trying to grab this one ring and it's desperately keeping me alive, or, you're playing with your son and then all of a sudden like you get hit and you're like, quick, Teddy, grab that ring. And then they miss. And then you're like, but I still love you.
Good try, buddy.
Yep. We're dead. So I liked that, just being able to, again, make the mistake and then home back in. And then also too, is that I feel it takes, and this could be a double-edged sword, but takes some of the variability out of the encounter in the sense that, when I was fighting the snake dude was the first guy, whatever his name was, it was one of the names I chirped out.
Oh, yeah.
The snake guy, he was the first boss that I actually struggled with,
you
know? Because I couldn't just brute force him. You had to kind of wait and learn his patterns and all this stuff. But like, so the first time I fought him, I hit him like 3 or 4 times, I don't know, but he just plummeted my health, So the second time I'm like, okay, I've gotten him like 7 or 8 times, but I've got more health left. So it allows you to watch your performance versus the goal you're trying to achieve and say, am I doing a little bit better? Am I learning? Or is what I'm trying to do not working and I need to try something else?
So I'm glad you mentioned the bosses because I completely spaced and I have no notes about this. But one of the things I noticed about the bosses that I was really fascinated by is I also struggled because he's like one of the first like real bosses. And I also struggled with him at first. And then I realized it's not a single screen boss like most Sonic bosses are. Most Sonic bosses in the the early 2D Sonics exist in a fairly confined space, which puts Sonic at a massive disadvantage, right? Because his whole thing is gotta go fast. So when I was fighting Snakey McSnake and Snake, and he had like an attack where he shoots straight up in the air and then like kind of rains down everywhere. And then something happened where I ran off like the left side of the screen because you encounter him when you're heading right, of course. And then I realized, oh, there's like 4 screen widths of available like Coliseum for this great combat. And his stupid rain down from the sky thing only goes like a 20th of that, or like 20% of that distance. So like you can easily escape it if you flashy dashy off the left or off the right side of the screen. I was like, okay, this feels like a lesson I should probably internalize and like fact check against the next boss. Do they expect me to use the ability to move fast in a large area as a way to outwit my enemies? And yes, they super duper do. And with some of the later bosses, it's a little more obvious because the boss themselves is huge. But with the early bosses, they're like your size.
Yeah.
It's not obvious that fleeing from them at 1,000,000 miles an hour and then coming back at 1,000,000 miles an hour is part of the pattern. It's part of what they expect you to do.
Right. No, I agree with that. That I don't know what it was, but with several of the bosses, that one in particular, the way they fought, my instincts were completely counter to.
Yeah.
So like
I struggled.
Yeah, because when I would see them start to do a thing, whatever my knee-jerk reaction was, put me into their line of fire. And I'm like, they had to have planned around that because, especially now that both of us experienced that, right? It's just like, oh, this is what, especially that one where he shoots up, because here's the problem with that, right? Is that he shoots up and it rains down, right? Unless you accidentally jump over him. And then he shoots you nonstop.
Yeah, and you get like juggled.
Yeah, you get juggled and it takes away like half of your health.
Yeah.
So I'd be doing fine, and then all of a sudden he'd be like, I'm going to do my shooty thing. I'm like, crap, I got to get out of the way. And then I'd just jump over him, It was the video game equivalent of taking something out of the microwave and being like, this is burning my flesh. Quick, put it in your mouth. Yeah. So I did really, really struggle with that. One of the things, so kind of boss related, is so there were a couple of times when I hit a brick wall on a boss, right? And I was generally playing with my kids, at least in the room, because, this is a game that I can play with them in the room. Dark Souls, not so much.
Less so.
Yeah, not if I want them to sleep through the night. So what would happen is, we'd hit a brick wall at the boss, and I'd say, like, okay, guys, we'll pick this up tomorrow, right? And then I'd pause it and, eventually go play another game. The autosave mechanic it autosaves you at the beginning of the stage.
Yes.
It's not at the last checkpoint.
Yes.
Which I don't really know why.
I don't
Why
know
not just save it at the checkpoint?
I don't know. Like because I played this game in fewer longer sessions, which I usually try to have like some short sessions and some longer ones to like see if those are both enjoyable ways to experience the game. And so the first time I loaded, I was like, oh, right, I just started, stage 3 or whatever. And so whatever. And then the next time I played, I stopped in the middle. And then the next time I went to play after that, I loaded and it was like the opening cutscene to that stage. And I was like, no, but I already did a bunch of this.
Yeah, I did this.
Granted, the stages aren't super long.
They're not. No.
But still, it's just like, come on.
Yeah. Well, especially the nice thing was that's what gave me the ability to experience different characters, because I got to I think it was the snake boss, and then stopped, and then went into reload, and it was like, oh no, super psychs are at the beginning of the stage. And I was like, you know what, now's the time. I'm gonna try playing as Mila.
Right, because you're like, oh well, I already spent money I didn't mean to spend.
Yeah, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna play as Mila. I'm just kidding. I'm gonna play as Carol. Mila sucks. Because I played as Mila very, very briefly, and then I was like, oh no, she kind of works like Tails. She has some of that. I took a couple of notes, but then I was like, this game was not built around her mechanics. So then I played as Carol for up until stage 4, and I was like, this isn't built around Carol either. It's built around Lilac.
Yeah.
And that was one of my other notes, which was just very much so like Sonic, where Sonic's built around Sonic.
Oh yeah.
Where it's like, yeah, we created some other characters, there's some other cool mechanics, and probably some secrets you can only get with certain characters, and so on and so forth. And does it create some replayability? Absolutely. Does it create a much greater depth of game with very, very little cost? So all you have to do is create a character that moves a little bit differently, as opposed to creating whole new levels. Absolutely. Definitely don't stop doing this. But man, if you got one chance to play through this game, you play through it as Lilac.
Which the game does sort of steer you towards.
Yeah.
So I will say really quickly, just in case somebody has already tweeted at me or already filled out the feedback form on the website, this game came out in 2014. The sequel does come out this year.
Okay.
So original, this one we played 2014. Sequel is supposed to come out in the back half of 2022.
Okay. Wait, but before you said 2019.
I think I said 2021. I think I said last year.
Yeah.
This was way
so
off.
You're wrong.
I was wrong.
It's pretty wrong, man.
I couldn't look it up until now. I've been busy.
There's stuff going on.
No, the thing that you need to internalize to be successful as Lilac, and this is all related to the addition of combat, right? I feel like this is where the fact that they chose to include combat is where all of the real deviations from Sonic, like how Sonic feels to play, they all come in with the combat. Because you got Snake Eye who's like roar and shoots up in like a crazy Texan, like straight up into the air. And what they actually expect you to do is one of two things. One, just casually saunter through his sprite, because by the way, most enemies don't offer collision damage.
Yeah, they don't.
Yeah, which is huge.
Game changing, yeah.
Yeah. Or they expect you to use the flashy dashy, because when you use the flashy, did you say its actual name earlier? Because I've just been calling it the flashy dashy. Her like dash attack.
I mean, maybe, but I like flashy.
You said like dragon something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you when you use the flashy dashy, you are specifically invincible and you harm things you collide with.
Right.
Right. So if you are on one side of an enemy and you need to get to the other side of the enemy, honestly, most of the time you can just walk through them, or you can flashy dashy if it's a boss and you don't want to risk it. Because some enemies and certain bosses do have collision damage, but it's almost never their whole sprite. Like this was brain melting for the first like 30 minutes I was playing the game. Is I'd be flying a million miles an hour and I would run, because Lilac doesn't roll, even though I press down a bunch of times to try and make her roll. She doesn't roll.
Carol rolls.
Yeah, she does. But it's like you go flying through an enemy and there's that like sphincter tightening moment of like, why didn't I drop all my rings? It's like, oh, because attacking is how you interact with enemies. That is also how enemies interact with you.
Yes.
just passing by them does not mean you get hurt and somehow they are unscathed. They also have to initiate combat, which is wild.
Yeah,
like,
it's very disorienting at first.
I kind of love it.
Oh no, I absolutely loved it. Like it was because and I think that the reason why is because none of your attacks are particularly have a great range, you know? So like you've got to get pretty close to them before you can hit them, you know? So because of that, it would have been mind-blowingly frustrating if every time you started to get close to attack them, and then just by virtue of them existing, they hit you. But it feels way more almost like a samurai clash, where it's like we both entered each other's square, and then whoever actually attacked first does it. So it's actually kind of more fair in the sense that, you know, you both have to attack. You know, if you're in each other's sprite and you attack, whoever attacks first gets it. But no, absolutely. And the thing that I appreciate about it is that it makes it way more approachable for a younger audience, you know?
Yeah.
So like,
yeah, because the world isn't just constantly hostile.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, there were Teddy would be able to play. Teddy has played Sonic Mania, right? But Lizzie, my 4-year-old, she was able to play this game because even though she wasn't great at attacking things, as long as she didn't run into them while they were attacking, it was no harm, no foul, you know? So yeah, no, I really like this. I don't think that this type of thing would work for every game, but it definitely worked here, I feel.
Yeah, and it's the biggest like mechanical change, I think, to the formula. Like more than the stamina bar for your special move, more than the health bar, more than, you know, checkpoints being essentially unlimited as long as you don't, you know, quit the game. The fact that you have to either choose to interact with the world or the world has to choose to interact with you really lets you maintain that roller coaster without honestly, it creates a kind of intellectual honesty of, if you are Sonic and you are going at the speed of sound so fast you can roll through solid stone walls,
like
right?
Speedo Sound Sonic?
Yes.
Which is actually from a different franchise.
Yes. So like, if you're moving that fast, but you're in the run and not the roll, the idea that when you collide with an enemy, you get hurt and they don't is asinine. It's completely stupid. But, you know, I mean, it's a video game. We all just accept it, and you learn to play around it, and hopefully they design levels that make that fun and not infuriating.
But it's ASA 10, man.
It's at least ASA 10.
Yeah.
This one goes
ASA
up
12
to ASA 11. But the fact that Lilac, who her whole thing is like, oh, she's super fast, like she's a dragon, dragons are super fast, and she's like one of the last dragons, whatever. Yeah. But she can actually use her speed as a defensive thing, not an offensive thing, because just running through the world at top speed does not essentially enter you into combat, right? Now, when you're in the flashy dashy, which only covers maybe what you think like 1 or 2 screen lengths.
Yeah, something like that.
It's not a ton.
No.
But you do actually damage things you collide with when you're doing the flashy dashy. But I just really was confused as hell at first, but then really settled into like, I like this. I didn't think about it being more forgiving to kiddos. To me, it just felt more like thematically consistent. Like, yes, she's running past them.
Right. When it does kind of feed into more of what you were kind of saying before, where you kind of interact with the world on your own terms, in the sense that, you know, you CollectAthon, you collect the coins you want to, or the gems you want to collect, right? You know, kill the enemies you want to kill, you know, because you don't have to kill them, because in Sonic a lot of times you have to dispatch enemies because they're in the way.
Right.
And if you try to get past them, you won't. But in this one, you really only have to kill the enemies that you feel like killing. You only have to play the amount of the game you feel like playing. Speaking of, this game did something I think that was absolutely critical for the design choices that they made, which was they made a like adventure and a classic mode.
And be specific about what the difference is there.
My understanding is the only difference is that classic takes out all the cutscenes.
Yep.
And that's about it.
Yep. One of my first notes when I first sat down to play the game, because I was like, you know, oh, okay, this looks like this feels like that. Oh, there's different modes. I'll need to make sure I figure out what that is later.
Nice.
And then when I did circle back, and I was like, oh, it removes the copious amount of
copious. So many. There's so much story here, and one questions if one needed this much story. But again, so to me, I was like, oh, this will be like a Sonic game. I know Teddy and to a degree Lizzie can play Sonic games, so this will be the game we play as like a family, which is also actually kind of nice because then while they're playing, I can be taking notes,
Right.
as opposed to constantly like pausing and writing stuff and going back. So when my kids are like, do we get to play the game now? What's going on? I'm like, okay, because at first I was like, I'm gonna read, I'm gonna internalize this story. Oh my god, I can't. I'm really struggling to follow this. Okay, that's fine. I don't have to like listen to them say all of it. I will just speed read it, so that way the kids don't have to deal with it. It's still too much. It's way too much.
Happening.
It's way too much. And then there would be 5 or 6 scenes, which is weird, right? I mean, like, because I would be fine if it was one fairly long dialogue intensive scene, but I mean, even Final Fantasy Tactics doesn't pull this shit, man.
Yeah, there are whole like 11-minute Adult Swim shorts that take less time.
Because, and the thing that bothers me about the multiple scenes is that not only is it a little bit jarring from a storytelling standpoint, but you think you're done and you're about to play the game again, and it's like, oh, no, there's more talking to be done by a character that you haven't seen in a while, and you're like, oh,
and
okay.
I gotta say, and I'm going to try and say this in a diplomatic way because I don't want to be needlessly about this. The writing is not good.
It's just
the word I would use to describe it is immature.
Right.
This reads like a story structurally and the individual lines themselves like it is someone's either first pass at writing something of this magnitude, because there's a lot of story, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot in here. Or they were trying to go for a childlike, like, what is the sort of story like a 14-year-old or a 12-year-old like Sonic superfan would write? It feels fanficky, like it's just an immature writing style. Now, to be fair, on the flip side of that, the vocal performances are actually very good.
Yeah.
So like you have these voice actors, because every character is voice acted, right?
Yeah.
Even there's a couple computers in the end game that are voice acted. Like everyone who has dialogue is also fully voice acted, and they really save some of the story.
Yeah.
Like, and you, unfortunately, it sounds like you missed some of that because you were like hammering through it.
I was getting very impatient.
Yes. So like, you're getting impatient. Your kids are like, we want to enjoy the video game data.
Yeah.
Right. And so like,
please, Papa.
I'm like sitting back, like listening to this, and I'm like, this story is insane, but holy crap, she is so committed.
She's selling it. Yeah.
There's in spoilers, in like the later part of the game, like you think Millie is dead, and the blood curdling scream that Lilac lets out is like, Jesus, this woman's going for the Oscar. Like, it's like this writing does not honestly merit this level of performance.
Yeah, the writing very much so seems like, and this is just my thought on it. I mean, any number of different things could cause this, but it feels like this is a story that somebody had in their head for like 15 years. Like since they were a kid, they're like, oh man, like what if there was and then they just kind of slowly added to it in their head.
One day I will tell the tale.
Yeah, and then eventually they sat down, put pen to paper, and then just shipped it as is. All of that being said, though, thank God that somebody somewhere said, not everybody's going to be in this for the plot, So let's make a mode where it just, and because it would have been so easy for them to just say, oh, well, if you just press start, then it'll skip each individual cutscene. You just have to press start 5 times. It's like, or you really wanted to feel like a Sonic game, play it on classic mode. And it just all that crap lifts out, So, so I was way more forgiving about to me, the banana pants plot was almost like, it was very juvenile, but it was almost endearing because I didn't have to deal with it. If I had to deal with it, I would have been really frustrated that somebody thought that this was worth my time. But the fact that like I get to walk up and interact with it in my own time, it's like watching Thanksgiving. It's like, that's not a great movie, but I don't know, man. Get some people together, get a couple drinks, be pretty fun.
Every bit of this game just smacks of like passion project, right?
Yeah.
Because the credits, I was able to finish this game. The credits are not long, right? So this is a small group of people who wanted this thing to exist, and they made it exist, right?
Yep.
And I love that. To me, that's an indie game can be made by a lot of people, but I feel like when you have 300 industry veterans who just happen to not work for one of the big studios, it's like, is this an indie game? Like, yes, it was published independently, but it has all of the benefits of decades of industry experience, right? This is more of like what I think of as an indie game of like, these are not professionals, or this is like their freshman attempt. Like now they're professionals, but they weren't before this game. Like this is the game that, this was their first battle, right? The thing that kind of put me, as a grown ass man to the point where I was like, oh, okay, all right. I said earlier, there's a lot of Americans think Asian crap is cool in here. And hey, I'm one of them. I like Japanese stuff. I like Chinese stuff. I like Thai stuff. I like Asian crap. Like I was raised at a time in history when all of that stuff was very like, isn't this cool and exotic? And I fell for it, and it's too late to change my ways now.
Now you're in it.
So as an adult, I try to honor it as opposed to co-opting it like I did as a child. And that I say that very specifically because there is a scene like in the first 25% of the game where you go to like the one like short guy with the big red hat who has like an obvious Napoleon complex. And he's like, oh, hey, come in. And, I'm going to yell at you for like reasons because he thinks he's in a position to be a jerk to you. And he's like, but he's obviously like powerless. So it's kind of played off for laughs. And he invites you to a banquet. And the food they have at the banquet is like sashimi.
Yep, sushi. Yeah.
Right. And you can hear it because all the voice actors they're certainly American, right? I don't know what they, if their English is their first language or what, but none of them seem to have any accents, right? But they go like sushi with like the very like a strong attempt at a Japanese pronunciation. None of the other words are pronounced like that. And then like the big anime like eating, like they look like Goku like shoveling it in, right? And with Goku, first off, he is Japanese. And secondly, that's played for laughs because he's normally so hyper focused on violence. To see him indulge in food, and then later when Vegeta becomes a good guy, to see Vegeta also indulge in food that way, it's just like, oh, this is funny because it's like, haha, silly. These characters are silly all the time. So for them to then lean into like, oh, so kawaii sushi, I was just like, and this will be the last thing I say about this, and then I will cede the floor. The reason that was cringeworthy to me is because I was that 14-year-old. Like I was the cringy white, I wish I was Japanese 14-year-old growing up watching anime, like swords are cool. So like, I'm not making fun of these people. I was these people, right? But I was just like, I'd hoped we had moved past that because I was those people decades ago. They was those people a few years ago. Right. So it's like, no, let's not indulge in this anymore. You can enjoy their culture without like being weird about it.
Yeah. Fortunately, I didn't really. I don't think that I was ever.
It's the last joke that closes a scene, so you were probably just like,
oh yeah,
button mashing.
Because I remember that scene, and I'd become frustrated at that point. I'm trying to think, like, because when I was a kid, I didn't really get into like heavily into anime and stuff until I was maybe a senior, like about to go into college. Like, yeah, because that was the thing is that a lot of the stuff that we kind of bonded over was stuff that I had like a thing that I had been into in that genre, right? So when you're like, oh yeah, we bonded over RPGs. The only RPG I'd ever really played was Dungeons and Dragons. Like, that's it. So like when you're like, yeah, that, but like you can get this crap on tap. You don't need to get like 5 people together. It's like, oh my god, or like it's like, oh yeah, man, you check out this anime, check out that anime. It's like they have this outside of Dragon Ball Z. How neat. Anyways, the only other thing the only other real throwaway note that I have is that there's a timer in this game.
Counts up.
Yep. So
Sonic timers count down.
Yeah. So this again, I think, kind of goes into the theming of play the game the way you want to play it, right? So I liked it because again, I was playing with my kids, and so if there was a countdown timer, I'd be like, okay, there's 100 seconds left. I now need to take over because otherwise we're going to die, But the fact it just counted up, I was like, oh yeah, now it's actually kind of nice because I can see how fast Teddy can clear level versus Lizzie versus me versus whatever, Yeah. And also it was really kind of nice because having a count up timer on the screen, and you could, hey Teddy, come here for a second. See that? When it says 20, your turn is over, and it is your sister's turn until it says 25, and then it's your turn again.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I like that. That's smart. It's using the tools afforded you by the game in smart ways. What I personally identified with it is at the end of a stage level act, whatever, you get like a little report, like just like the end of a Sonic act, right? Like how many crystals did you find? How long did it take you? Whatever, like, and it like totals up your, I think, rank.
Yeah.
Right. You get some sort of ranking. I don't remember what they call it, but it's like if you are over 10 minutes, that knocks you into one of the lower rankings, which was not an accident because that's how long Sonic levels are. They're 10 minutes, right? And so I was just like, oh, that's cute, right? Because there's no possible way that was an accident, right? Even though 10 is a round number, right? And it's a base 10 number and it's super nice and everything, but like, no, that's not an accident. They picked 10 minutes because that's the Sonic level time.
Yeah.
The one other thing I wanted to pick your brain about just a little bit is this game has difficulties, right? There's casual, which is written in like a fun rainbow font, and then I think easy, normal, hard.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. There might be one like very hard or something in there, but there's I want games to please be more clear whenever you're gonna do this, because something I have fallen in love with is in a lot of modern narrative driven games that also have big action components. Your Uncharted's, your Last of Us's,
God of War,
right? One. Like, tell me explicitly what the difference is between the difficulties, and please name them in a way that aligns with that. So, story mode, right? This is for players who mostly just want to, see the world of Freedom Planitia and want to, get the story, right? Like normal, like this is the way the game is intended to be played.
Right. Some challenge, some, yeah.
Yeah. And then like super challenge mode, like levels don't have health drops or something, right? And it's like, and be clear and thoughtful about that. Like, because I feel like just you have half as much life or you do double damage or, enemies do double damage or something is like, that's not thoughtful enough. Like we designed the game and then we doubled all the numbers and called it hard, and we cut all the numbers in half and called it easy. I don't love that anymore. And again, like this is an indie game, so I understand it's way easier to do what I just said. But in the casual mode, because I messed around with it, and I don't know if the other modes have dramatic differences that I just couldn't easily pick up. But in the casual mode, one of the dramatic differences that they should put right on the difficulty select screen is your health regenerates. And it's like, yeah, that's casual. Like you can basically just throw yourself face first against a boss and beat them if your health regenerates, right? So unless you're taking damage so fast that it outstrips your Wolverine healing ability, then you can basically beat the game, no question, right? And like put that in an info box when I'm selecting difficulty, because otherwise casual, easy, normal, and hard, I'm like, I guess they're different.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. Mostly because, to your point, is that you don't know going in what to pick, right? Because I mean, and even if you say like, oh well, the difficulties are like clothing sizes. I tend to be an XL, so I'm just going to buy an XL. It's like, yeah, but what if for this shirt I wanted like a super slim fitting shirt? What if this time when I played the game, I did just kind of want to go through and play casually? I do think the word casual is a little bit better, but it would be, I think to me, is that when you put in difficulty settings, right? The first thing is and this takes no additional effort, in my opinion, which is just, like you said, descriptors, right? This one is for people who just want to enjoy the story. Like, so normally what I see is, casual story mode, whatever. Like, this is for people who just want to enjoy the story. And then the next mode up is normal, which is, this is the intended experience. Like you'll have some, some encounters will be more difficult than others, blah, blah, blah. And then there's hard, where it says, this is for people who want to like test their skill with the game. You will be able to make fewer mistakes, and the mistakes will be more deadly, something like that. And then there's like very hard, which is any mistakes will be punished. I'm like, okay, so I know I don't want to do very hard because I don't want any mistakes to be punished. Probably don't want to do hard because I'm not really looking to test my skill, but also I want a little bit more than just the story. So that helps me where I'm at. Then the next thing you can do beyond that is just be, to your point, upfront about what things did you change about the game, And then if you really want to go above and beyond, right, create a custom mode where you can change those things about the game, right? Which is something that the Last of Us 2 did, where literally you can go in and say like, all right, I want the bad guy's aim to be this bad, because like,
I mean, that game's like the gold standard now.
Accessibility
stuff is so good.
Is it fair to compare those two? Nope.
But, when did the original Last of Us? Well, Last of Us 2 had all this stuff. Okay, so this came out before that,
right?
So Freedom Planet 2 should have all that stuff
easily. But and again, though, is that if it is a dial that can be brought up and down. So, for example, like your health regenerates. Let's just say, right? Not only should that be a thing that you should be able to turn on and off, I can't imagine it's too difficult programmatically to determine how fast it regenerates too. So if you said, I want my health to regenerate, but only a little bit, because I'm struggling with this part or whatever. Or, no, man, I want it up at a 5. I want like literally I want my wound to be knitting around the sword while it's still in me. So that's how I plan on disarming my opponents. Or if it said, your stamina bar regenerates faster or never depletes. And to your point, right, is I think that there are just so many different easy ways to change the difficulty where it's not just making the numbers go higher or lower, right? Where you could say, okay, we've increased your jump, a little bit more. I mean, Celeste obviously did the things where, you could change the speed in which it happens, right? And in this case, a lot of the double jumps from Celeste would translate into double your stamina bar, 4 times stamina, infinite stamina, like just, again, like all of these things you could do to just tweak the difficulty. But at a minimum, give me a description outside of, I don't know, you want to play on normal or hard? I mean, because you know what that is? That's like me walking up to just somebody who doesn't know me and saying like, hey, we're going to spar. How hard do you want me to go? And it's like, I don't know. Like, how good of a fighter are you? I'm like, I'm good.
Good enough.
Kick your ass.
First person I've asked today. So I'm sorry.
Good enough to offer $1,000 for somebody to come here and try to kick my...
So there was actually one other thing I wanted to ask you about. And weirdly, that violent metaphor reminded me. So did you experiment or rely on or care about the fact that you have multiple like different attacks at all?
Yeah, I mean, to a degree, because like there's a circle attack, the double X attack, and like the triangle attack, right? And like the square attack, if I remember correctly.
No, I'm thinking of something totally different.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay, so what I'm talking about is like you can like up attack and then down attack will make you like
I didn't screw around with that a whole
like
lot.
Sure you can, and then right.
Yeah.
And also you have a double jump which draws from your stamina the same way your flashy dashy does,
right.
And you can't flashy dashy without a full stamina bar, right? So the flashy dashy is an attack, and then your double jump is like cyclone, and you do a little spin, and while you're spinning, you can also do damage. And
I thought circle was awesome.
Maybe. I mean, I could have very possibly screwed this up.
But continue. Yeah.
And so what I noticed, because there's a bunch of combat stuff. And what I noticed is the more mobile you are while you are causing damage, the weaker that attack seems to be. So like the uppercut and then downward kick is like it's in a pretty tight horizontal space, and you just kind of go like almost straight up and then almost straight down. But that one seems to hit hard. The cyclone, you are double jumping and you have amazing air control, so you can like fly all over the damn place, right? And that one doesn't hit all that hard, right? The flashy dashy, you are invincible while you're doing that, so that one hits the least hard. And I was like, oh, this is pretty smart. Like, the riskier the attack is to you, like if you screw it up, you will get hurt, then the more damage it causes, so that there's a very clear cost benefit. Like, why would you want to use the Shoryuken when you could just flashy dashy back and forth in a line? It's like, well, yeah, you can, but if you just flashy dashy to one side of the screen and then the other, you will eventually kill the boss, but it'll take 1,000 years, right? And if you land like a handful of Shoryukens, like they're done.
Yeah, I didn't use the up square down square a lot. The feel, and I have zero data to back this up, but the feel that I got was it maybe less about like the intrinsic power of the move and more so the number of frames you were likely to stay in the enemy's hitbox while executing the move.
Yeah, it's power versus mobility.
Right, which is kind of saying the same thing in a different way, which is to say that like when you do, like I think that the flashy dashy would do as much damage if their hitbox was the length of your flashy dashy.
Yeah, if you were drilling them the whole time. Yeah.
So because what I mostly did was the double jump, but I would then just use my air control to just stay like right on top of them, and I felt that dealt like adequate damage typically. So that was the main thing that I used, because I did also rely on its mobility to peace out when things got real.
Yeah, and that was how because I went half the game easily without really thinking like, oh, these attacks are different in a meaningful way, because there's this one boss that was just eating my lunch, and then I stopped using the cyclone so that I could save my stamina for the flashy dashy, which meant I had to just jump and hit like regular attack. And the regular attack is more powerful because it has a smaller hitbox, and you only have like a smaller window of time where it will actually hit them. And I beat them that time, and I was like, oh, this hits harder. Like, okay, right. And so then that like made me kind of experiment with it a little more. And I mean, you can be perfectly successful probably just relying on almost any one of them. There's one boss that you have to use exclusively the flashy dashy to beat, just because it's like the big dragon and you got to move back and forth across the stage. It's actually a projection from a robot that looks like I don't know. Story's weird.
But to be fair, the robot was genetically engineered
by dragons. But yeah, I thought that was like, you can tell a lot of the little mechanics they change. And you know what? I'll just say, we can take this into the last bit here. Did it learn from history?
Mm-hmm.
You can tell that a lot of the things they changed, they made small changes on, because they were like, whoa, we don't want it to completely feel like a new thing. We still want it to feel like Sonic. The combat is such a change to the Sonic formula that seems to be where a lot of their thought and intentionality, and like, we're going to try to fine tune these things so that it feels good, because we have nothing to compare it to.
Right.
We know how fast the screen should scroll. We know what it should look like to feel like you're going fast, because we can just steal all that wholesale from Sonic. But like punching, kicking, flashy dashy things, like that's all new, right? So it seems like that's where they put all their attention, and to tremendous effect, right? So for me, like, no nostalgia goggles required. Like, the ridiculous ass story notwithstanding, like, this game is phenomenal. Super great.
Yeah, so agreed. No nostalgia goggles required. The game, it's fun. It plays very well. The things that it does change are fun and interesting. It's kind of like saying, I really love steak, and they're like, oh, well, have you tried steak with a little bit of horseradish sauce? And it's like, no, is that good? And it's like, oh man, you should try that. And you try, and you're like, this is nice. It's not completely different from steak, but pretty good. So yeah, man, like, as far as, like this game, I think it's really good. I think it's really popular. I think it's going to fly off the shelves. I think it's going to go fast.
The curtain falls, the music plays, the credits roll, then it all fades to black, and you're left by yourself. The fanfare is gone, there's no player two there by your side to share victories won. But as you slowly progress down the hall to your bed, a few great events leak back into your head from the time that you spent traversing the land, battling evil, fighting the darkness, just sword in hand. Your memories creeping with the edge of a smile. You realize again what you lost for a while. You're gonna think back much less on how you saved the day than on all the experience gained at the end of it all. Gamers play what we play, not for game over, but rather for what we take away. The world is
if you like Sonic, play this game. If you don't like Sonic, play this game.